talk about God with. Because half of you probably don't believe, and half of you probably believe in something pretty abstract. Which I think means that I can't go wrong as long as I don't tell you what to think or try to educate you on the way you're supposed to believe. So I'm not going to do that, and if I do, disregard. But first, a preamble. Theology is a game of semantics. It's poetry. It's abstract. One of the things I always have to remind myself is that the modern church doesn't really produce artists anymore. It does, but to a small amount. What it really produces is experts in the law. If I show you a picture and then ask each of you to describe what is in that picture, each of you is going to come up with something, an explanation that's completely different. Some of you will use words, and those words will be different than the other words used. Others will draw. Maybe there will be even some less traditional explanations. This being Prince Edward County, maybe we'll have some dancers or something. No two will be alike. Theology is the finger pointing at the moon, not the moon itself. And one of the systemic problems organized religion will likely never overcome is that it attracts people who take a lot of pride in making the right decisions. People who have either never made a mistake because they've never taken chances, which I think is a mistake in itself, or those that are so insecure that they need to cling to a set of rules so that they can feel better about following them. But the good news is that God loves you. You are already saved. You are enough. You are loved. Nothing that you do will change that. I'm not saying this is all religious people, but religion in general and big religions in particular often attract these people. In other words, they're overrepresented. And these are often the people who struggle most with art or abstraction or even subversion, which is my favorite. Yet they're also good at following rules and climbing in systems. So they tend to thrive in places like churches. And so whenever I'm reading the Bible, theology, or any other holy text for that matter, I try to remember this. I try to remember that in the case of the Christian tradition specifically, we have 100 generations of people whom not all may understand artistic expression. We're trying to explain a Romanized version of the second generation's account of a loose and chaotic group of outsiders and weirdos. It's always very likely that we have over-formalized and over-structured something that's designed to be messy. Something that benefits from the messiness and the abstraction. And the fact of the matter is, and this is an X-Files reference, by the way, I want to believe. I keep trying to shed my belief in God, but I keep coming back around. I don't like what a lot of people are doing in God's name. I don't like the image traditionally associated with God. I definitely don't like the idea that God is judging the world, because so often that judgment is a thinly veiled human judgment designed to give the speaker power over the audience. When I hear some people talk about God, all I want to do is believe the opposite. And it's a hard pill to swallow that there is some omniscient puppeteer guiding all that is happening here on earth, because there are some very dumb things happening on earth. It's not lost on me that I chose the passage about Israel escaping Egypt the weekend that they decided to bomb Iran. The last time I tried to stop believing in God, I embraced chaos. The world makes a lot of sense to me if it's just chaotic and organic. There are two ways of looking at nature, and they're both true. Nature is cruel, and nature is amazing. For every beautiful sunset, there's some poor creature dying, scared, and alone. But it does balance out. It finds an equilibrium, and that equilibrium is beautiful, majestic, amazing. I can accept that one day I might be that scared little creature because today I get to enjoy the sunset. Nature finds a way, and somehow that way is beautiful. And accepting this makes it a lot easier to accept the difficult things in the world. Vladimir Putin makes a lot more sense in a chaotic world because he's a product of his environment. Sometimes these things happen, but also sometimes they don't. There's always something tragic happening, but in a chaotic world without rhyme or reason, an organic march towards entropy, it's easier, in my mind anyway, to look at each problem one at a time instead of a giant interconnected web of evil. I really like viewing the world as simply organic because it allows me to focus on one problem at a time rather than being overwhelmed by all of them at once. So maybe the world is better without God, or at least that version of God. But like I said, I want to believe that the universe is benevolent, that this vast, cold, organic place is marching towards better. That we already have all the things we need for heaven on earth. That the odds are stacked in our favor. Mr. Rogers, the children's entertainer, famously said that whenever something awful happens, we should look for the helpers. And he's right. For every senseless act of violence or natural disaster, there are people in every community lining up to help. Often an overwhelming number of them. Even people that I don't like working with, the people with the kinds of opinions and habits that I think make the world a worse place, even those people help. And it doesn't matter who you are or what your ideology is or why you're doing it, if you're clearing rocks or cleaning wounds. It just doesn't matter. The work is getting done, and somehow it always does get done. That's a beautiful thing. And so the thing is, I have no idea if God exists, but I do believe that if we think things can get better, they will. And that might be the best proof of God that I've ever heard. In that case, it doesn't even matter if God actually exists. What matters is the belief in something that helps us get out of bed and help. The belief in something that helps us to go fight the good fight, as they used to say, though I don't really think any fight is good. If you're fighting, you've already lost. Changing topics for a minute. One of my favorite things to do is go sailing in low wind. It sounds awful, and most people hate it, but to my mind, sailing in the low wind is the peak of sailing. Our slideshow is now trying to connect to the projector. I have to find my place again. Where'd it go? The beautiful thing about sailing just in general is trying to dance with the invisible. You would be forgiven for thinking that the best sailing conditions are when the waves are consistent, maybe medium, strong wind with no gusts or lulls or shifts, and all dead straight from the same direction. But the thing is, it's the variations that allow you to get ahead. Sailboats, they can't sail straight into the wind, but most can sail at about 45 degrees to it. And so if that wind is coming from one direction in one place and a slightly different direction in another, you can use that to your advantage. You've got to get your angles right. You've got to read the environment properly, but that's the fun of it. And then you use that difference to multiply your upwind progress. The same goes for other angles to the wind. Sailboats are faster when they're going about 45 degrees, or fastest when they're going about 45 degrees to dead downwind. So it's more comfortable sailing as well. So if you can catch the right wind patterns, you can spend the most time going at optimal speed in the most comfort. And low wind days are the epitome of this effect. Not only do you have to look for the puffs out on the water and find the most elegant way to string them together, but low winds tend to be squirrely. They swirl and they do things with the geography that you don't expect. Sure, you don't move very fast, but I don't know about you, I've never complained about sitting by the water on a nice, beautiful, calm day. Low wind sailing is meditational too. If you move around, you rock the boat and you shake the wind out of your sails. Sails aren't flat, they're shaped like an airfoil. So if you shake the wind out of your sail, you shake the shape out of it too. So just a public service announcement, if you have a boat that makes a wake, stay away from sailboats on low wind days. It's like sneaking up on someone meditating with an air horn. In any case, sailing in low wind, it's all about meditationally chasing these little disparate puffs of wind and stringing them together to get from point A to point B. It's a fabulous way to spend a lazy afternoon, and I wonder if that's not the best metaphor that I know for searching for the divine. If I want to go out on the water on a nice calm day, I've got three options. I can use some kind of auxiliary power like paddles or a motor to go straight to my destination. I can get frustrated with the lack of wind and go nowhere, or I can try to string these little glimpses of wind together into some kind of meaningful journey. And to my mind, that's like life. Maybe all that we see around us is chaos after all. Maybe it's just random things happening. But can we not, with discernment, still string those things together for a better journey? Is that perhaps the effect that we're pointing at when we talk about God? Does it make God any more or less real? I don't know. And one could see how that might make less sense to someone who's anxious or very action-oriented or insecure. So we're living in strange times. We might never fully understand what it is we're going through right now, but as someone that studied history, I don't think we tend to understand these things well until they're behind us. These things, they're only visible in retrospect, and even then, the actual events have passed, and all we're left with is imperfect stories to try and string things together with. So I don't want to suggest that I actually understand what it is the world's going through, but I do often wonder if it doesn't have something to do with a loss of hope. Back to sailing, I used to sail with this guy who we'd race every week, and I could just walk past him every week on the race course. And every week he'd beg me to tell him how I did it. And I'm not saying I'm a great sailor. I'd start by talking about how the wind on this particular day worked and how we often sailed by this island that caused an advantageous shift. But he didn't care. There was often a literal line drawn. If the wind was just right, you could see this line going across the Bay of Quinte where the two currents met, but he never believed me. He thought that I knew something that I wasn't sharing and would walk away frustrated every time without listening. And eventually this went on long enough that he began to get aggressive, and we don't talk anymore. And I wonder if something similar isn't happening around us. If too many people... Why are you doing this? I often wonder if something similar isn't happening around us, if too many people have lost the belief that those faint little puffs of wind can be connected. If we lose the belief that we can string little puffs together into something useful, maybe we're not going to bother. We're just going to get angry and find ourselves in an angry world that makes life worse for everyone. And perhaps that's a privileged thing to say. All I can see is the takeaway is privileged white guy with sailboat thinks everybody should just chill out a little bit. The thing is, if you don't have a choice but to hop from one puff to the next, you do it without thinking. It's called survival mode. It's the people with more privilege that I think get the most angry. It's the people that are impatient. The people who are angry that it's not windier or that they're not in a motorboat, or those people that seem to have the least hope. I've noticed it's a lot of older men who don't understand why people aren't listening to them like they used to, or younger men who want what they think their fathers had. Now, today is Trinity Sunday, and the Trinity seems to baffle a lot of people, and I've seen some really stupid arguments about it. But it's always seemed actually fairly simple to me. You've got God, the name we use to describe this intangible thing that may or may not exist, but the Bible tells us is benevolent, this mystery that loves us despite everything. And then you've got Jesus, who was one of us and talked to us in a tangible way that we understood. And finally, you've got the Holy Spirit, which is my favorite. Ruach in Hebrew, or pneumatos in Greek, which in both languages is the name for wind. Being a sailor, I've always liked that a lot. It's not hard that they're one in three and three in one if you look at it abstractly. It's an imperfect metaphor, like all metaphors are, for understanding something we'll never understand, the divine. Maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't, but this is the language we've traditionally used to talk about this intangible thing we're pointing at when we're talking about God. And at the end of the day, I'm not sure it matters whether God exists or not. And I don't want you to feel like you have to believe in one thing or another. I do think that if we believe the universe is benevolent, that we already have everything we need to live healthy and fulfilling lives, and that the organic chaos of the world can be strung together in a way that will benefit all of us, then I think we'll move in the right direction together. And the most important thing we can do to move the world in that direction is get together for reflection, meditation, and conversation in places just like this. So let's do a little more meditation and then go have some good conversations afterwards. So Tom, we've got some music for contemplation now.